My name is Nia Thornton, 70 years old, 25 years in real estate escrow, which means I have read more fine print than most people see in a lifetime. I know what a deed means. I know what a signature means. And I know what it looks like when someone smiles at you while already planning to take what is yours. I used to think family was the one place that kind of thing did not happen. I was wrong. On a Thursday evening in April, my daughter Amara slid a glossy brochure across a restaurant table and told me, in the gentlest voice she could manage, that she and her husband Quentin had found me a wonderful place to live. Gardens, no stairs, a community calendar. She said the word transition like it was something soft, like it was not what it was. She never once asked what I wanted. What she did not know, what neither she nor Quentin had figured out, was that I had been watching longer than they had been planning. And the night they chose to hand me a future I had not asked for was the same night I had already decided to show them something they were not ready to see. Before we get into it, if someone you loved has ever treated you like a problem to be managed instead of a person to be respected, stay with me. This one is for you. The restaurant was a soul food place just off Peachtree Street, the kind of spot where cornbread comes out in a cast iron skillet and the whole room smells like somebody's grandmother is in the kitchen. Which I suppose is exactly why Amara picked it. Familiar, warm, the kind of place that makes you drop your guard. I arrived early, ordered sweet tea, watched the evening settle over the street. My old friend Marion had come with me. I had called her 3 days before, asked quietly, and she said yes, without asking why. Marion is like that. She understands the things you do not say out loud. My granddaughter Zara was already there when I walked in, 21 years old, amber eyes that miss nothing. She hugged me the second she saw me, long and tight, the kind of hug that says someone is bracing for something. Amara and Quentin came in together, 5 minutes late. He checked his watch before he even sat down. I held my sweet tea. I smiled at my daughter, and I waited. Then Amara reached into her bag and placed the Willow Crest Senior Living brochure on the table. Stone Mountain, Georgia. Set it down like it was already decided. "Mama," she said. She only calls me that when she wants something. "We found the most beautiful place. A garden, no stairs. You would not have to worry about the Midtown house anymore." Quentin nodded, said nothing, checked his watch again. I looked at that brochure. Then I set down my tea, folded my hands, and said, very gently, "That is interesting, sweetheart. Just like the last time you assumed I did not know anything about the Buckhead apartment." Amara's smile flickered, just for a second, like a candle catching a draft. Quentin looked at her, one quick, sharp glance. They thought I was a 70-year-old woman who had stopped noticing things. That was their first mistake of the evening. Stay with me, because what Amara did not know about that Buckhead apartment is the thing that changes everything. If someone you loved did this to you, would you confront them right there at the table, or would you wait and prepare like Nia did? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. I want you to understand something about Amara before I go any further. Because this is not a simple story, and she is not simply a villain, she was the one who stayed. When Marcus died 6 years ago, it was Amara who came to the hospital, who sorted the paperwork, who sat with me in that quiet house on Peyton Road for 3 weeks and did not leave when the grief got heavy. She was, for a long stretch of years, a genuinely good daughter. But debt changes people. And Quentin has a particular way of changing Amara. That evening she was performing. I could feel it. The way she touched my hand twice, complimented my cardigan not once but 2 separate times, asked about my blood pressure and my knees with the kind of careful detail that only makes sense if someone has been building a case. Marion sat at the corner of the table and watched all of it with those still, steady eyes of hers. After the main course, Marion leaned close and said quietly, "Nia, Amara called me last week, asked very detailed questions about your health, your paperwork, whether I thought you were managing on your own." I set my fork down. "What kind of questions?" I said. The kind you ask, Marian said, when you are building a file. So it had already started. I had suspected, but hearing it said plain like that was a different kind of cold. When the brochure came out and Amara started talking about Willowcrest, I asked simply who would be covering the costs. She said they would handle everything, sell the Midtown house, take care of it all. Before you make plans for my house, I said, you might want to look carefully at the paperwork for the Buckhead apartment you have been living in for 8 years. Quentin's hand tightened on his water glass. Not much, just enough. Amara laughed, thin, grasping, and said that was a conversation for another time. The evening ended with hugs and promises to talk soon. I drove home to Peyton Road and sat alone in my kitchen. That night, the messages started. From Amara. Mama, we are only trying to help. We love you. From my cousin Derek, who I had not heard from in 2 years. Auntie Nia, I heard you have been having some confusion lately. Just checking in. Confusion. That was the word they were using. I sat with that word for a long time. Then a message came from a number I did not recognize. Mrs. Thornton, be careful about what your daughter is preparing. She did the same thing to someone in our family. We never got our money back. I saved it. Did not respond. Filed it the way I file documents I am not sure I will need, but keep, because experience taught me the things you are not sure about are usually the things that matter most. Then I went to the hall closet and took down the cedar box. Marcus gave me that box 20 years ago. Cherry wood, brass hinge, his initials on the lid. Inside, our wills, the Midtown deed, insurance papers, and one other document I had not looked at in years. A copy of the lease to trust agreement for the Buckhead apartment, bearing Amara's signature. Notarized March 14th, 2016, stating clearly that the property belonged to me and would transfer only at my sole discretion. She had signed it 8 years ago. She had been grateful, frightened, distracted. Zara's father had just had his finances collapse, and Zara was 12, and I had bought that apartment so my granddaughter would have a roof that no creditor could ever touch. I had not made it a gift. I had made it a trust, structured carefully because 25 years in escrow taught me one thing above everything else. Love without documentation is just a memory, and memories can be rewritten by people with something to gain. Amara signed the document without reading it closely enough to understand what she was signing. I had not engineered that, but I had anticipated it. The next morning, I called Emory Healthcare and scheduled a full cognitive evaluation. Not because I was worried about my mind, because I knew what was coming, and I wanted a document with a date stamp, clinical, certified, plain, that said my faculties were completely intact. Then I called the real estate attorney whose card I had kept in the cedar box since 2019. 3 days later, I was standing in the Kroger on Ponce de Leon Avenue, reaching for chamomile tea, when I heard Quentin's voice from the next aisle. He was on his phone. He had not seen me. We have copies of everything, he said. The deed, the insurance, the account statements. The attorney thinks if we file the emergency guardianship petition before the end of the month, it moves fast enough that she will not have time to... He stopped. I stood very still on my side of the shelving, holding my tea box, and listened to the silence where the rest of that sentence should have been. Then I put the tea in my cart, paid, drove home. That evening, I made 3 calls. One to my attorney, one to Zara, and one to the real estate listing agent whose number I had been holding for 6 weeks. The full price offer came in the following Tuesday. $425,000, closing in 30 days. And before that ink was dry, I already knew exactly how Sunday was going to go. What Amara was doing, I want to name it clearly, not to excuse it, but to see it honestly. When people are drowning in debt and shame, they do not reach out honestly. They reach for control instead. They dress their desperation up as concern, call their self-interest love. It is a slow drift, not a single decision, each small step justified by the one before it, until one day you look up and you are somewhere you never meant to go. Amara did not wake up and decide to be cruel. She woke up afraid. And fear, left alone long enough with the wrong voice in your ear, can hollow out a good heart without either of you noticing until it is too late. What she did not account for was a woman who had spent a lifetime reading exactly this kind of fine print. They came on a Sunday. Of course they did. Sunday is supposed to feel safe. Amara called it a family meeting. That told me everything. Who had set the agenda and who was simply expected to receive it. They arrived together, Amara in her bright work clothes, Quentin in his pressed shirt and the large watch he wears the way some men wear authority, visibly, constantly. Khalil drove separately from Macon in his silver Camry, face carrying the look of a man who has not slept and is not sure he is doing the right thing. Two cousins I recognized from family reunions, and last through the door a man named Vance, financial transition consultant, who had the practiced smile of someone who does this regularly and has learned to make it look like care. I had set the dining room table with the good china. The cedar box sat at my left elbow. Vance opened with a folder and a warm, measured voice. "Mrs. Thornton, we are simply here to make sure all of your needs are being met going forward." "I appreciate you coming," I said, hands folded, cedar box closed. Not yet. Quentin set a thick binder on the table with a sound meant to feel final. Inside, he said, were documented concerns. A missed utility payment 14 months ago, a neighbor's alleged comment about the garden hose, a note from a 2022 doctor's visit where I had mentioned feeling fatigued. Built like a case. Cold, methodical. The full confidence of a man who believes the person across from him will not know how to respond. Then Amara spoke, voice dropping soft. "Maman, none of us want to do this the hard way. Willowcrest is beautiful. You would have your own space, a garden. We would visit." We would visit. Like a kindness. Like something I should feel grateful for. I looked around the table. Khalil was staring at the tablecloth. The cousins looked uncertain. Zara had not said one word and was sitting perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap. I opened the cedar box. One by one, I laid documents on the table. The Midtown deed, the Buckhead Trust Agreement, the Emory Healthcare Report dated 9 days prior, cognitive function intact across all assessed domains. I smoothed each page flat before moving to the next, the way I had done it for 25 years. Amara watched. Her expression moved through several things quickly. Confusion, recognition, then something harder underneath. "That apartment," she started. "Has a full-price offer," I said. "Closing in 3 weeks." The room went quiet. "Maman, that apartment is mine. You gave it to me. It was always meant to be a gift." "You signed a document that says otherwise," I said. "Page 3, your signature. Notarized March 14th, 2016. Quentin leaned toward her and said something fast and low. Too late. Zara stood up. 21 years old. She stood the way some women are born standing, quietly, without announcing herself, with a gravity that turned every head in that room before she said a single word. "I need to say something," she said, voice steady, hands not. She placed a folder on the table. Bank statements, her college savings account, the one I had set up at her birth, the one Amara had held access to until Zara turned 18. The statements showed withdrawals, regular, unremarkable looking, spread over 4 years, totaling just over $31,000. "I found these when I turned 18, Zara said, looking at her mother. "Grandma sat me down when I was 12 and told me plainly, the Buckhead apartment is a place to live, not a place we own. I understood that. I was 12 years old and I understood it. What I did not understand was why my college fund was $31,000 short when I got there." The room made a sound, not a word, not quite a gasp, just a collective breath that meant everyone present understood exactly what they were looking at. Quentin pushed back his chair. Vance closed his folder and looked at the wall. Khalil took off his glasses and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of his nose. Amara said, "Zara, that money was for household expenses. You do not understand the full—" "Mama," barely a whisper, "please do not." I reached into the cedar box one more time, took out my phone, already queued, set it on the table. Before anyone says one more word about my mental capacity, I said, I want to play something. I pressed play. Amara's voice came through clearly, unhurried, practiced. I was wondering, if a family member wanted to expedite a cognitive assessment for an elderly parent, is there a way to flag it as urgent? We are under some time pressure. The voice on the recording asked about the nature of the urgency. Amara's voice again. She has been having some episodes. Nothing formally documented yet, but I think if someone evaluated her in the right context, the picture would become much clearer. I stopped the recording. Amara had gone the color of ash. Quentin stood straight up. I reached in one final time and placed a photograph on the table. 15 years old. A woman holding a baby in the doorway of an apartment building, crying and laughing at the same time, because she had nowhere else to go and her mother had just handed her the keys. Amara. Zara. The Buckhead apartment, the day they moved in. That apartment gave you a home, I said, when you had nothing. I never asked you to thank me. I never asked you to memorize what you signed. But I need you to understand what is sitting in front of you right now. That is not a property you own, and I am not a problem you manage. I am your mother, and I am not available to be managed. The silence after that was the loudest I had heard in years. Quentin picked up his binder, walked to the front door, and left without looking at anyone. The screen door closed behind him, flat, final, like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Amara had not moved. Her gold bracelets were very still. Vance said quietly to no one, I think we are finished here, and let himself out. The cousins left without making eye contact, and I sat at my own table with the good china and the cedar box, and I waited. Now, let me tell you what was really happening inside that room, underneath everything you just witnessed. Amara did not come to that table as a monster. She came as a woman who had spent months slowly convincing herself that her needs and her mother's well-being were the same thing. That is one of the most dangerous things a human mind can do. Collapse the line between what we want and what we call love. Quentin's voice had become the loudest in her life, crowding out her own conscience the way noise crowds out silence. She did not choose betrayal in a single moment. She arrived there in small steps, each one justified by the last, until she looked up one day and did not recognize herself, but had too much at stake to turn back. And Quentin, men like him rarely lead with cruelty. They lead with plans, with logic, with the calm efficiency of people who have learned to frame every act of self-interest as a reasonable solution. By the time Amara understood fully what she had agreed to, walking away meant losing everything she had built her identity around. What broke through all of that was not confrontation, it was evidence. Evidence does not argue or get emotional. It simply sits on the table and tells the truth. And there is nothing a well-rehearsed story can do against it. The confrontation was not the hardest part of that afternoon. The hardest part, the part that cracked something open in every person still in that room, was still coming. After the cousins left, after Vance drove quietly away, after Quentin sat in the driveway for 15 minutes and then backed out without coming back inside, 4 of us remained in that dining room. Me, Amara, Khalil, and Zara. Amara had not moved from her chair. She was crying, the silent kind, the kind with nothing left to perform. Mascara down in 2 thin lines. The bright colors of her clothes looked wrong in that late afternoon light. Too vivid, too loud for how quiet the room had gone. I looked at my son. Khalil had his glasses off, 2 fingers pressed to the bridge of his nose. He had driven up from Macon that morning and had been carrying something heavy since the moment he walked through the door. I had known it. I had waited for him to come to it himself. Khalil, I said, what do you need to tell me? He put his glasses back on, looked at his sister, then at me. They told me you were losing your mind, Mama. Voice low, raw. 6 months ago, Amara started calling every other week. Said you were forgetting things, that the neighbors were worried, that she had spoken with your doctor. I wanted to believe her. I think I needed to believe her, because it was easier than asking myself why she needed me to believe it so badly. Amara said, "Khalil, do not. She told me if I cooperated with the guardianship filing, if I signed on as co-petitioner, she and Quentin would pay back what they owed me." The room shifted. I felt it in my chest. "What do they owe you?" I said. He reached into his jacket and placed documents on the table. Bank statements, a personal loan, $14,000 he had lent Amara and Quentin in 2021, never repaid despite repeated promises. And something else, a small joint investment account he and Amara had contributed to for 10 years, through which Quentin had quietly redirected funds without Khalil's written authorization. The plan, Khalil said, was to use the guardianship to get control of the Midtown house, sell it, pay off their debt, pay me back, keep what was left. That was the arrangement they put to me. I was so far under with my own finances that I almost said yes. He stopped. That word sat in the room. Almost. "You were going to let them have me committed," I said quietly, "so they could make you whole." He looked at me, eyes wet behind his glasses. "Yes, Mama, I was. And I am not going to sit here and tell you I did not know what I was doing. I knew. I am telling you now because I cannot walk out of this house without saying it to your face. There is a particular kind of pain that does not come from enemies. It comes from people who know better and choose wrongly anyway, because they are scared or tired or because someone got to them first. I had been holding that pain quietly for months, and now it was just there in the room with us. I let it be there. Then I reached into the cedar box one last time. At the very bottom was a white envelope I had kept for 6 years without opening. Marcus's handwriting on the front, neat and deliberate. For when it is time. He had pressed it into my hands 2 days before he died, told me I would know the moment. I had carried it through 6 years of grief and ordinary life, and one very extraordinary Sunday. I had known since Tuesday that today was the day. I opened it, a single handwritten page. At the bottom, witnessed and notarized in 2008, was a codicil to Marcus's original will, prepared quietly through his own separate attorney without telling me. He had specified that both the Midtown house and the Buckhead apartment were to be held in trust by me as sole trustee, with the remainder interest passing to Zara and Khalil in equal shares upon my death or voluntary transfer. Amara was not named anywhere in the document. The attorney's notes, attached, at client's explicit direction, Amara Lawson is excluded from remainder interest due to documented pattern of financial instability and history of borrowing against family assets without repayment. Dated June 3, 2008, 15 years before any of this began. Marcus had known. He sat with that knowledge quietly for years, watching, saying nothing, not wanting to break something that was not yet fully broken. But he prepared, in the only language he fully trusted. Amara read the document over my shoulder. I heard the exact moment it landed, a small, sharp intake of breath, almost nothing. "Daddy," she whispered. "Your father loved you," I said. "He loved you, and that never changed. But he also knew you, and 15 years ago he made sure you could not do what you have been trying to do." The full price offer on the Buckhead apartment, $425,000, was already in contract. Under Marcus's trust, every dollar of those proceeds would flow directly into protected accounts for Zara and Khalil. Not for my personal use, not to Amara, not to Quentin. Closing in 3 weeks. The debt they had built their entire plan around resolving, every piece they had moved into place for months, it landed on nothing. There was nothing to contest, nothing to appeal. The document was airtight because Marcus had been a careful, quiet man who loved his family with both his heart and his judgment. Amara did not collapse dramatically. She slid slowly from her chair and sat on the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn up, still in her bright office clothes and gold jewelry. looking like someone who had been running very hard for a very long time and had finally hit a wall. Zara went and sat down beside her mother on the floor, said nothing, just sat close, the way you do when language has run out, and being there is the only honest thing left. Here's what I want you to understand about what happened in that room. Underneath the revelation, underneath the collapse. What fell apart was not just a plan. It was a story Amara had been telling herself for months, that she was the responsible one, the daughter making hard decisions out of love. When the evidence stripped that story away piece by piece, she had nothing underneath it to stand on, because the story had been the structure. That is what happens when we build our self-justification on half-truths. When reality arrives, the whole thing comes down at once. And Khalil, his confession mattered more than he perhaps realized. The hardest thing a person can do is name their own failure without softening it. He did not say he had been confused or misled. He said, "I knew, and I almost did it anyway." That kind of honesty is not weakness. It is the first step out of the very trap that had swallowed his sister whole. As for Marcus, a man who loved his daughter and still excluded her from his will was not being cold. He was being honest about what love actually requires. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is refuse to protect a child from who they have chosen to become. He saw it. He said nothing to spare the peace, but he prepared. And he waited for the right moment to speak, even after he was gone. What came after that afternoon is where this story finally, fully exhales. The weeks that followed moved the way legal things move. Steady, unhurried, already decided and simply being made formal. The emergency guardianship petition Amara had filed in Fulton County Family Court, concerned for the cognitive welfare of an elderly dependent, was withdrawn before it ever reached a hearing. My attorney made one call. The Emory Healthcare report did the rest. Case administratively closed in 9 days. The Buckhead apartment closed on a Tuesday morning. I sat in the conference room of the law office on Peachtree Center Avenue, signed where I was asked to sign, and watched $425,000 move exactly where Marcus's trust had always said it would go. 2 protected accounts, one for Zara, one for Khalil, each structured so that no outside party could pressure or leverage either of them into redirecting a single dollar. Not a spouse, not a sibling, not a financial transition consultant named Vance. I drove home through Atlanta traffic, terrible as always. I was grateful for it. The slowness gave me time to sit with the fact that a chapter had ended. Not the family, not the love, not the unfinished work of what came next, but the chapter where I was a problem to be solved. That one was done. Amara and Quentin moved out of the Buckhead apartment within the month, found a rental south of the city, modest, which I say not to be unkind, only because accuracy has been the point of this story from the beginning. The debt they had tried to solve by removing me from my own life did not disappear when their plan failed. It was still there, patient, the way debt always is. Quentin did not contact me. I had not expected him to. Amara texted 4 times in the first 2 weeks. The first 3 messages were long, paragraphs about financial pressure and fear, and how she had lost herself somewhere in trying to protect her family. The 4th was different. 3 sentences. "Mama, I am sorry. I do not expect you to respond. I just needed you to know I said it." I read that message standing at my kitchen counter, coffee in hand, early morning light through the window over the sink. The same window, the same light, 30 years of it. I did not respond right away. I thought about it the way I think about documents before signing. Carefully, without rushing, making sure I understood what I was agreeing to. When I finally wrote back days later, I wrote, "I know you are. I love you. But love is not the same as an open door." When you have done real work, not words, but honest, sustained work on yourself, we can talk about what comes next. Until then, I am here, but I am not available to be managed. She read it, did not reply immediately. That was all right. Some things need time to absorb properly, and I had waited long enough to stop rushing anyone else's process. Khalil sent a handwritten letter, 2 pages, arrived on a Wednesday. I read it at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee going cold. He said the things he had said in the dining room, but slower. The language of a man who has sat alone with something long enough to understand its full weight. He said he had spent his whole adult life staying out of the middle of things, telling himself that keeping the peace was the same as doing right, that this year had taught him they were not the same. He said he was sorry, plainly, without conditions. I wrote him back, told him I loved him, told him being weak once did not make him an untrustworthy person. It made him a person who had been weak once, which was different, and something he could choose to move away from. He came to dinner the following Sunday, brought a peach pie from a bakery in Macon, arrived early, set the table without being asked. We talked about ordinary things, his neighborhood, a book, the way the spring had come in slowly that year. The cousins who had been in that dining room reached out in the days after. A few changed their positions openly, said what they witnessed was not a family trying to protect an elderly mother, and they were not willing to pretend it was. Zara came over on a Saturday. We spent the afternoon going through the hall closet, the kind of project that never feels urgent until suddenly it does. We found 4 boxes of Marcus's old jazz records, a bread machine nobody had touched since 2009, and a framed cross-stitch my mother had made in 1974. Small, carefully done, thread a little faded. A quiet spirit is a strong spirit. I had always kept it in a drawer. That afternoon, I hung it in the hallway where I could see it from the kitchen. Zara sat at the table while I made tea. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "You can always ask me," I said. "Were you scared through any of it?" I brought the tea over and sat across from her. This young woman with amber eyes and her grandmother's patience and her whole life still opening ahead of her. "Every single day of it," I said. "But scared and decided can live in the same body. I have known that a long time." She was quiet a moment. "I did not know Grandpa Marcus had written all of that into the trust." "Neither did I," said. "He knew things he kept to himself. Quiet, careful, always thinking 3 moves ahead. I used to mistake it for stubbornness. Turns out it was love, expressed in the only language he fully trusted." Marion came by that week. We sat on the front porch the way we have been sitting on front porches together since 1989. Tea, long history, the ease that comes from decades of honest friendship. The old porch swing creaked the way it always does. I stopped trying to fix that creak years ago. Some sounds you come to love for exactly what they are. "How are you doing?" she asked, not the quick version. "I am doing," I said. Then, "Marion, do you ever think about what it cost our mothers? Their mothers before them? Everything they held together without anyone asking how they were holding up." She was still for a while. "More than I used to," she said. "I think we were taught that sacrifice was the whole story," I said, "that giving without asking was the measure of a good woman. There is truth in that, real truth. But the second part did not always get told, that love without a boundary is just an open door. And some people will walk through an open door and take everything in the house and never once understand that what they took was not theirs." A car moved slowly down Peyton Road. The evening settled the way Atlanta evenings do in May. Warm at the edges, sky going soft above the rooftops. "Are you at peace with how it ended?" Marion asked. I thought about Amara on my floor, about Marcus's handwriting on that white envelope, about Zara sitting beside her mother in silence, because some moments have no language. "It has not ended," I said. "It moved into a different chapter, and I intend to be here for it." There is a lesson living inside all of this, and I want to name it plainly, not as a lecture, just as something true. The women who give most freely are often the most exposed, not because they are foolish, but because the people around them have learned that the door is always open. Setting a boundary is not a betrayal of love. It is what keeps love honest. And the women in our families who organized quietly, documented carefully, and said nothing until they had everything, they were not cold. They were wise. They understood that love without structure is just hope. and hope alone has never held up in court. What comes next is the part that healed me, and I think it might heal something in you too. There is one particular morning I want to tell you about, because it is the truest ending to this story that I have. Saturday, about 6 weeks after everything came through. The Buckhead apartment closed, the guardianship petition withdrawn, the cedar box back on its shelf, brass hinge catching the morning light the way it always has. The Willowcrest brochure in the blue recycling bin by the garage door, face down, where it belonged from the start. Zara had come to stay the weekend. She was asleep in the room at the end of the hall, the small room with the yellow curtains Marcus picked out in 1998. They should have been replaced a decade ago. They never were, because they were his curtains, and the light comes through them in a way I have never had the heart to change. I made biscuits from scratch that morning, the real kind. Cold butter, light hand, patience. Jazz station on low, the one Marcus always preferred. The kitchen smelled like butter and coffee and warm bread. The light through the window was the particular gold of a Georgia spring morning that makes you understand why people spend their whole lives here and never leave. I stood at that counter for a long moment before I started mixing anything. Just stood there, listening to the house, the refrigerator hum, a bird somewhere in the magnolia out back. The particular creak of the second floorboard at the top of the stairs, the one that has announced every person who ever lived in this house for 30 years. The one Marcus kept promising to fix and never did. The one I have stopped wanting fixed. Zara came downstairs in an oversized sweatshirt, hair loose. She stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment before she said anything, just stood there, taking in the biscuits, the radio, the yellow curtains, the life that was still here and still mine. "Grandma," she said, "I am so proud of you." I laughed, a real one from somewhere low and genuine. "Baby, I am proud of me too." She helped me set the table. We ate together in the morning light and talked about Marcus and his jazz records, about her great-grandmother who once told a landlord in Birmingham she would not be moving until the Lord himself said so, and then lived in that house 47 more years without one word of apology. "That is where you get it from," Zara said. "That is where we all get it from," I said. We did the dishes together after. Zara washed, I dried, the radio still going soft in the background. And somewhere between the second plate and the third, she said, not looking at me, just looking at the water, "Grandma, do you think Mama will be okay?" I dried that plate slowly, set it on the rack, thought about it the way the question deserved to be thought about. "I think your mama is going to have to decide what okay means for herself," I said. "And that is not something I can do for her. I tried doing things for her for 45 years. Some of it helped. I think some of it made it easier for her to never quite learn how to stand on her own." Zara was quiet for a moment. "Do you feel guilty about that?" And there it was, the question I had been carrying since that Sunday. Since long before that Sunday, if I am being honest. "Yes," I said. "Some days I do. Not about protecting myself, but about the years before. The times I smoothed things over when I should have said something. The times I made it easy for her to borrow without consequence. I thought I was being a good mother, and maybe sometimes I was. But I also think I was afraid of the discomfort, afraid of the conversation. And she paid for my avoidance just as much as I paid for hers." Zara turned off the water, turned to look at me, those amber eyes steady and full. "You are being really hard on yourself," she said. "No," I said, "I am being honest with myself. There is a difference. And at 70 years old, I am too tired for anything less than honest." She hugged me then, standing there in my kitchen with her hands still damp from the dishwater, hugging me the way she had hugged me the night I walked into that restaurant on Peachtree Street. Like she was bracing or steadying, or maybe just finally letting go of something she had been holding for a long time too. I held on to her, let myself hold on, because here's the thing nobody tells you about being the strong one in the family. The one who prepares, who documents, who reads the fine print and stays quiet until the moment is right. Nobody tells you how lonely that is. How many nights you sit in a kitchen that smells like butter and coffee and wonder if you made the right calls. Wonder if you were too slow, too patient, too generous for too long. Wonder if a different version of you, one who had spoken plainly 10 years earlier, might have changed the shape of everything. I do not have the answer to that. I am not sure anyone does. What I know is this. I made the decisions I could make with what I understood at the time, out of love, even when the love was imperfect. And when the moment finally came that required something different from me, I was ready. That has to count for something. I have decided that it does. I have thought a great deal about what to say about Amara, because she is still my daughter. She will always be my daughter. The woman who slid down from her chair and sat on my floor, she came from my body. I rocked her as a baby, drove her to school 12 years straight, wept in a hospital room when Zara was born, because there is nothing in this world like watching love continue into the next generation. Nothing that happened erases that. But love is not the same as unlimited access. A person can hold someone in their heart and still require them to knock before entering. Forgiveness is not going back to before. It is something new, built on the honest understanding of what happened and what has to be different going forward. I do not know yet what the next chapter between Amara and me looks like. I know I have not closed the door. I know I will not spend whatever years I have left carrying anger at my own child like a stone in my chest. But the old arrangement is done. The version where I absorbed everything and asked for nothing and trusted that being a good mother meant making myself available to be diminished, that is gone. I am 70 years old. I am not diminishing anymore. What I understand now, having lived through all of it, Amara and I had been in an unspoken agreement for years. She would need and I would provide, and neither of us would name the terms. That works for a while. But unnamed agreements always break eventually, because what is unspoken can be reinterpreted by whoever has the most to gain. The moment Quentin entered that dynamic, the terms shifted, and because they had never been stated plainly, Amara had no anchor to return to. Clear limits are not walls against love. They are what make love legible. They tell everyone in the room exactly where they stand, and that clarity protects even the people who resist it. Marcus understood that. He built it into a legal document and sealed it in cherry wood. I understand it now, too. Some evenings, I sit on the front porch in the old rocking chair, the one that creaks, the one I should have replaced years ago, the one that sounds like familiar company. Tea in hand, watching Peyton Road go quiet, thinking about what it means to protect yourself, whether that is a form of love or a departure from it. About all the women I have known who carried invisible things for decades and were called strong, when often what they were was simply without other options. Here is what I know now. Protecting yourself is not the opposite of love. It is the condition under which real love becomes possible. Love that asks you to disappear is not love. It is erosion. The people who truly see you, who truly love you, do not need you smaller to feel safe. Zara knows this. Khalil is learning it. Marcus knew it in his bones and left me the evidence in a cedar box with a brass hinge. I am living inside it now, one ordinary, irreplaceable day at a time. This story teaches us that the deepest love does not mean the absence of limits. It means being honest and brave enough to say, I love you, and I require your respect. That dignity is not something age takes from you. It is something you carry forward or surrender by choice. And that choice is always yours. That the quiet women, the ones who held families together for decades without recognition, who gave without demanding, deserve to be seen, heard, and protected. Most especially by the people they poured themselves into. And that it is never too late. Not at 60, not at 70, not at any age where you still wake in the morning with your name on your own deed, light through your kitchen window, and a granddaughter who says, with her whole heart, I am so proud of you. It is never too late to stand at your own table, lay your documents down, and say, calmly, clearly, without raising your voice, I know exactly what I signed. The question is whether you do. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. If it moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love or of yourself, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment and tell me the moment that hit you hardest. I read every single one. Until next time, take care of yourself. You have earned it.